Amara was a young girl with an adventurous spirit, always seeking the unknown. Unlike the other children in her village, who were content playing by the river or helping their parents in the fields, Amara's heart longed for mystery. She had always been fascinated by the ancient forest that bordered the village, a place of towering trees, thick vines and endless shadows. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it a place of wonder and danger. The elders often warned the children, "Do not venture too deep into the forest, for it holds many secrets." Legends had been passed down for generations about the enchanted forest. Some spoke of spirits that guarded hidden treasures, while others whispered about creatures that had never been seen by human eyes. There was a tale of a tree that bore golden leaves, a river that sang at night, and a bird whose song could lead a person to fortune or doom. These stories only fueled Amara's curiosity. She would sit by the village fire at night, listening to the elders tell these tales, her mind painting vivid pictures of the wonders that lay beyond the trees. Her parents, like everyone else, forbade her from wandering too far. They told her that the forest was not meant for humans, that those who went too deep were never seen again. But Amara could not ignore the pull she felt whenever she looked toward the towering trees. It was as if something was calling to her, urging her to uncover the truth behind the legends. One afternoon, as she gathered firewood near the forest's edge, she noticed something unusual. The air around her felt different, heavy with an unfamiliar scent, something sweet and floral, yet ancient. A soft breeze carried a strange melody, almost like a whisper, barely audible but impossible to ignore. It was unlike any bird song she had ever heard. The sound sent a shiver down her spine, yet at the same time, it filled her with excitement. She glanced back at the village, where smoke rose from the cooking fires, and she knew her mother would soon call her home. But the pull of the melody was stronger than her caution. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping past the usual boundary, deeper into the trees. With each step, the world around her seemed to shift. The light filtering through the leaves turned golden, the wind whispered her name, and the song grew clearer. She knew she was breaking the rules. She knew she was stepping into the unknown. But Amara was no longer afraid. She was ready to uncover the secrets of the enchanted forest. As Amara wandered through the forest, carefully picking ripe berries from the low-hanging bushes, she suddenly froze. A sound drifted through the air, faint but distinct. A song unlike any she had ever heard before. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, yet layered with an enchanting melody that seemed to pulse with life. It did not resemble the usual chirping of birds or the rustling of leaves. This song had a rhythm, a pattern, as though something or someone was calling out to her. She straightened, her basket of berries momentarily forgotten. The sound was mesmerizing, weaving itself into her thoughts, making it difficult to focus on anything else. It was as if the song was meant for her alone, wrapping around her senses like an invisible thread, pulling her forward. A chill ran down her spine. The elders' warnings echoed in her mind, reminding her that the deeper parts of the forest were not meant for human feet. But the melody was irresistible. It tugged at her curiosity, whispering promises of something extraordinary just beyond the trees. Her heart pounded, a mix of excitement and fear battling within her. She hesitated, glancing back toward the direction of her village. The safe path was behind her, familiar and predictable. But the song was ahead, floating through the dense foliage like a golden thread, leading her into the unknown. With a deep breath, she stepped forward. As she moved deeper into the forest, she noticed the world around her beginning to change. The trees stood taller here, their trunks wider than any she had seen before. Their branches stretched high into the sky, weaving a thick canopy that dimmed the daylight, casting the ground in shifting patches of gold and green. The air grew heavier, carrying the scent of damp earth and something sweet, something ancient. Every step she took, the song grew clearer. It filled the space around her, vibrating through the very leaves and branches, as though the forest itself was singing. Amara felt a strange sensation in her chest, as if the melody had found a home within her, resonating with her heartbeat. A flicker of doubt passed through her mind. What if this was a trap? What if the forest was luring her in only to never let her go? But even as she considered turning back, the song rose in intensity, wrapping her in its embrace. It no longer felt like a simple call. It felt like a voice, ancient and wise, beckoning her forward. Her feet moved of their own accord now, stepping carefully over twisting roots and fallen leaves. The deeper she went, the more she realized she had crossed into a place untouched by time, a part of the forest no villager had likely seen before. And then, suddenly, the song stopped. The silence was deafening. The air felt thick, waiting, and in that silence, Amara realized she was no longer alone. Amara stood frozen in place, her breath caught in her throat. The mysterious song had vanished as suddenly as it had begun, leaving behind an eerie silence that wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. The trees here seemed different, older, taller, their trunks twisted and gnarled with age. A strange golden light filtered through the canopy, casting an otherworldly glow upon the forest floor. She took a hesitant step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes scanned the dense foliage, searching for the source of the melody that had drawn her so deep into the jungle. Then, through the gaps between the towering trunks, she saw it. A massive tree stood in the heart of a small clearing, unlike any she had ever seen before. Its bark shimmered faintly, as if infused with gold, and its leaves glowed with a soft luminescence, reflecting the sunlight in dazzling hues of amber and yellow. The sight was mesmerizing, almost unreal, as though the tree belonged to a world beyond her own. Drawn by an unseen force, Amara stepped into the clearing, her eyes widening with wonder. Her gaze traveled up the colossal trunk, following the twisting branches that stretched toward the heavens. And there, nestled at the heart of the highest boughs, was something that made her breath hitch. A nest. It was larger than any bird's nest she had ever seen, woven together with strands of what appeared to be silver and delicate twigs that shimmered in the golden light. It sat securely in the crook of two massive branches, glowing softly as if it held a secret meant for no one to see. Amara's fingers curled into fists as anticipation built within her. What kind of creature could have built such a nest? Was it the same bird that had sung the haunting melody? Was it watching her even now? She took a cautious step closer, craning her neck to get a better view. A glint of something bright caught her eye from within the nest. Her breath quickened. There, nestled safely in the center, were three perfectly smooth golden eggs. Her mind reeled. They weren't just golden in color, they gleamed as if they were made of actual gold. The sunlight bounced off their polished surfaces, casting dancing reflections on the leaves surrounding them. She had never seen anything like it. A flurry of emotions rushed through her: awe, curiosity, disbelief, and temptation. Could these really be gold? If they were, they would be worth more than anything her village had ever seen. Just one of them could change her family's life forever. But another part of her hesitated. The way the eggs rested within the nest, untouched, radiating an unexplainable energy, made them feel more than just treasure. They felt sacred. She swallowed hard. The golden tree, the glowing nest, the song that had led her here. Everything about this place felt magical, as if it existed outside of time. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. What had she stumbled upon? And more importantly, was she meant to find it? Amara's fingers trembled as she reached toward the nest. The golden eggs gleamed under the sunlight, smooth and untouched, as if they had been waiting for someone to discover them. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, her mind torn between hesitation and temptation. Just one touch, just to see if they were real. Her fingertips were mere inches away when a sudden gust of wind howled through the clearing, rustling the golden leaves with an unnatural force. The air grew thick with energy, and before she could react, a shadow passed overhead. A loud, piercing cry rang through the trees, shaking the very ground beneath her feet. Amara stumbled back, her eyes darting upward. From the sky, a massive bird descended, its wings spanning wider than any eagle or hawk she had ever seen. Its feathers shimmered in hues of gold and midnight black, catching the light like molten metal. But it was the bird's eyes that held her frozen in place. Two glowing orbs of deep luminescent blue, burning with ancient wisdom and power. Amara's breath hitched. She had seen large birds before, but none like this. None that radiated such presence, such authority. The bird perched upon the golden tree, its talons gripping the branch just above the nest. Then, in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine, it spoke. "These eggs are not for human hands." Amara gasped, stumbling backward. A talking bird. She blinked rapidly, wondering if she had imagined it. But the creature remained there, its glowing eyes locked onto hers, unblinking. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The bird's presence was overwhelming, its voice deep and steady, carrying a weight that made the air feel heavy. "You do not know what you have found, child," the bird continued. "These eggs are not treasures to be taken. They are not meant for greed or desire." Amara swallowed hard. Her curiosity burned brighter than ever. What were these eggs? Why were they golden? And why did this bird guard them so fiercely? Mustering her courage, she finally spoke. "What are they?" Her voice was small, uncertain. The bird tilted its head, considering her. For a moment, there was only silence. Then it answered. "They hold a power beyond your understanding, a power that must remain untouched." Amara frowned, her fingers still tingling from where she had almost grasped one. "But why?" she whispered. "What would happen if someone took them?" The bird's gaze darkened. "You would not want to know." A chill ran through her. The words were not a threat, they were a warning. Amara's heart pounded as she stared at the golden eggs, their smooth, polished surfaces reflecting the dappled light filtering through the golden leaves. The bird's words echoed in her mind. "These eggs are not for human hands." But the more she looked at them, the more her curiosity gnawed at her. She had never seen anything like them before. Were they truly magical? What power could they possibly hold? And why did the bird guard them so fiercely? A part of her knew she should listen. The warning had been clear. Yet another part of her, the part that had always longed for adventure, for discovery, could not ignore the temptation. Her hands trembled as she reached out once more. The massive bird above her flapped its wings, its blue eyes burning into her, as if it could read her thoughts. "Do not let greed guide you," it warned. Amara hesitated, but the pull was too strong. Ignoring the tightening in her chest, she carefully wrapped her fingers around one of the golden eggs and lifted it from the nest. The moment she did, the world around her changed. The air, once filled with the whispering of leaves and the distant calls of birds, became completely silent. Not a single breeze stirred. The trees stood still, their golden leaves frozen in place, as if the forest itself had stopped breathing. Amara felt a shiver crawl down her spine. It was as though the jungle was watching her, waiting. A strange energy pulsed through her fingers, humming beneath the egg's smooth surface. It was warm, alive, unlike any stone or treasure she had ever touched. A prickling sensation crawled up her arms, sending a warning through her veins. But she pushed the feeling aside. It was just an egg. What harm could it possibly do? Her hands shook as she slipped the egg into her basket, covering it carefully with leaves and berries. She cast one last glance at the giant bird above her. It remained perched on the branch, its eyes dark and unreadable, but it did not try to stop her. That was almost worse than if it had attacked. A deep unease settled in her stomach, but she forced herself to move. Her breath came in short gasps as she turned and ran. The moment she stepped out of the clearing, it felt as though the forest had exhaled. A gust of wind rushed past her, making the trees sway, but the eerie silence lingered. She didn't look back. She weaved through the jungle, her feet barely touching the ground. She didn't stop running until she reached the familiar outskirts of her village. Only then did she dare to slow, glancing down at the basket in her hands. The golden egg remained hidden beneath the berries, its secret safe. Amara let out a shaky breath, trying to ignore the voice in her mind whispering, "You shouldn't have taken it." She had no idea what she had just done. As Amara stepped into her village, she could barely steady her breath. The weight of the golden egg in her basket felt heavier than before, as if it carried an unseen force along with it. She hesitated at the threshold of her small home, the whispers of the jungle still lingering in her mind. Her mother was the first to notice her return. "Amara, where have you been?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "You know better than to stay out so late." But as Amara set her basket on the wooden table and slowly uncovered the golden egg, her mother's scolding turned into a sharp gasp. The flickering firelight made the egg shimmer, as though it contained the sun itself. The room fell into silence. Then, her father stepped forward, his eyes widening in disbelief. Where did you find this?" he whispered, almost afraid to touch it. Amara hesitated before answering. "In the forest," she admitted. "In a nest. A giant bird was guarding it." Her mother drew in a sharp breath, pressing a protective hand to her chest. Her father exchanged a glance with her, worry flickering in his eyes. They had all heard the stories of the enchanted forest, of the creatures that dwelled beyond human understanding. Soon, the news spread like wildfire. Within the hour, the village elders gathered in her home, their wrinkled faces etched with a mixture of awe and concern. Some knelt before the egg, whispering prayers as if it were a divine gift. Others kept their distance, their expressions dark with suspicion. "This is a blessing from the spirits," one elder murmured, his voice trembling, "a sign that Amara has been chosen for something great." But another elder shook his head gravely. "Or it is a warning," he countered. "A test, perhaps. Not all gifts are meant to be accepted." The debate grew heated. Some villagers spoke of prosperity, how the egg, if truly made of gold, could bring wealth to their struggling village. Others feared it would bring misfortune, that the spirits of the forest would come seeking what had been stolen. Then, a voice broke through the commotion. "I will take it off your hands." The speaker was a merchant, his robes lined with gold thread, his fingers adorned with rings. He stepped forward, a greedy glint in his eyes as he stared at the golden egg. "This is worth more than anything you could ever imagine," he said smoothly. "Give it to me, and I will make you richer than the village itself. You will never have to work another day in your life." The villagers murmured among themselves. Some nodded, seeing opportunity. Others remained silent, sensing something dangerous in the merchant's eagerness. But before Amara could speak, a soft yet firm voice cut through the air. "Not all treasures are meant to be taken." Everyone turned. Amara's grandmother, the village's eldest and wisest woman, had spoken. She sat by the fire, her aged hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed on the egg. "This is not ordinary gold," she continued. "It does not belong in human hands. It belongs to the forest." She turned her eyes to Amara, her gaze piercing. "Tell me, child, did the bird warn you?" A lump formed in Amara's throat. She lowered her eyes. "Yes." A heavy silence settled over the room. The egg glowed softly in the dim light, as if it were waiting. And deep inside, Amara felt the first stirrings of regret. That night, as the village settled into sleep, The sky darkened in a way it never had before. Thick clouds rolled in, swallowing the stars and the moon, casting an eerie shadow over the land. The air grew still, dense, almost suffocating. Then, without warning, the wind roared to life. It was not an ordinary wind. It howled like a wounded beast, twisting through the village with an unnatural force. Doors rattled, windows shook, and the trees bent under its fury. Amara lay awake in her bed, clutching her blanket as the sound of the storm filled her ears. Her heart pounded. Something was wrong. Then came the rain, except it wasn't rain. Instead of cool, refreshing droplets, the sky released a thick, sticky mist that clung to the ground like creeping fingers. It slithered through the village streets, curling around homes, seeping into cracks and corners. It carried a strange, metallic scent, unlike anything the villagers had ever known. By morning, the storm had passed, but the damage was done. The once flowing river that provided the village with water had shrunk to a mere trickle. The earth surrounding it was cracked and dry, as if it had been drained overnight. Villagers gathered at the banks, murmuring in confusion and fear. Then came another horror: the crops. The lush green fields that had promised a bountiful harvest just a day ago now stood lifeless. Stalks of maize, once tall and strong, were shriveled and brown. The fruit trees bore nothing but withered leaves. The vegetable patches were nothing but dry soil. A heavy silence hung over the village. But the most unsettling thing of all was the absence of birds. The jungle surrounding the village had always been alive with their songs. In the mornings, they would wake the villagers with their chirps. In the evenings, they would call to each other in the fading light. But now, the trees stood empty. No wings fluttered. No melodies filled the air. The forest was silent. Amara stood in the middle of it all, her stomach twisting into knots. She knew. The golden egg. The moment she had taken it, the balance had shifted. The bird's warning had been true. The forest, the sky, the very rhythm of nature, everything had been thrown into disarray. Guilt settled deep in her chest, heavier than any storm cloud. She had thought she was only taking an egg, but it was never just an egg. It was something sacred, something that belonged to the forest, to the world beyond human greed. And now, because of her, the village was suffering. Her fingers brushed against the woven basket in her hands, where the golden egg still rested beneath a cloth. It was cold now, no longer humming with warmth like before. She had made a terrible mistake, and she didn't know if she could fix it. Amara clutched the basket tightly as she stepped into the forest once more. The path she had taken before, once dappled with warm sunlight and the soft rustling of leaves, now felt cold and unwelcoming. The golden glow that had once guided her deeper into the woods had vanished, replaced by shadows that stretched unnaturally long. Her breaths were shallow, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every step she took felt heavier, as though the earth itself resisted her return. She had to fix this. She had to return the egg. But the deeper she ventured, the more the forest seemed to change. The trees, which had once whispered with life, now stood silent and twisted, their branches reaching like gnarled fingers. The air was thick with an unnatural stillness. Then, the temperature dropped. A sharp gust of wind rushed through the trees, carrying with it a sound, not a song this time, but a low, rumbling growl. Amara froze. A shadow passed overhead, and she barely had time to react before a powerful gust of wind knocked her off her feet. She hit the damp earth with a gasp, her basket tumbling from her grip. The golden egg rolled onto the forest floor, gleaming dully under the darkened sky. Then, it appeared, the guardian of the nest. The golden bird descended from above, but it was no longer the same creature she had met before. It was larger now, colossal. Its golden feathers flickered like flames in the dim light, its massive wings beating against the air with a force that made the trees tremble. Its once wise blue eyes now burned like twin fires, filled with anger and something deeper: betrayal. Amara scrambled backward as the ground trembled beneath its weight. "You have disturbed the balance," the bird's voice echoed through the trees, deep and thunderous. "Now you must face the consequences." A wave of pure energy rippled through the air, pressing against her chest like an invisible force. She struggled to breathe as the bird's gaze bore into her, judging, waiting. She knew she had done something unforgivable. She had taken something that was never meant to leave this place. And now, the forest, the land, the very sky itself was punishing her for it. Tears stung her eyes as she reached for the egg with trembling hands. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she whispered. "Please, let me fix this." The bird's wings stretched wide, casting a massive shadow over her. "You cannot undo what has been done," it said, "but perhaps you can make amends." Amara swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the egg. She didn't know what fate awaited her, but she was ready to face it. A heavy silence hung in the air as the golden bird towered over Amara, its massive wings casting rippling shadows across the forest floor. The once familiar woods had become something entirely different, a realm of judgment, of reckoning. Amara clutched the golden egg to her chest, her breath uneven. She had come here to return what she had taken, but she could see now that it wouldn't be that simple. The bird's burning blue eyes fixed on her, not with pure anger, but with expectation. "You have trespassed where humans were never meant to go," the bird intoned. "You have stolen from the heart of the forest. Balance has been broken." Amara nodded, shame burning in her chest. "I know," she whispered. "I was wrong." The bird lowered its head slightly, its sharp beak gleaming in the dim light. "Then prove it." A sudden shift rippled through the air, like the world itself had taken a deep breath. The trees creaked, and the very ground beneath Amara's feet changed. The once familiar forest floor blurred into something vast and endless. She gasped as she found herself standing atop a golden lake, its surface like glass, reflecting a sky that swirled with colors she had never seen before. The bird spread its wings wide, its voice echoing across the shimmering expanse. "To restore what has been lost, you must pass the trial of the guardian." Amara swallowed hard. "What do I have to do?" The bird's gaze darkened. "You must face 3 challenges: a test of courage, a test of wisdom, and a test of sacrifice. Only then will the balance be restored." Her heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. "I'm ready." The bird let out a low hum of approval, then let the first trial begin. At once the golden lake shifted beneath her feet, and the world around her melted into darkness. A cold wind howled, and suddenly Amara found herself standing at the edge of a deep abyss. Across from her, just barely visible in the gloom, lay a glowing platform where the nest waited, the place where the golden egg must be returned. But between her and the nest, there was nothing but empty space. The bird's voice rumbled through the void. "Cross the abyss without fear." Amara's stomach twisted. There was no bridge, no path, only the void. She took a trembling step forward and gasped as an invisible force beneath her foot solidified into something sturdy. A single step had formed. Realization dawned. She had to trust. With every step she took, the invisible path revealed itself beneath her feet. But as she reached the halfway point, the golden egg in her arms grew unbearably hot. Pain seared through her hands and panic shot through her veins. She staggered, her knees buckling. If she dropped the egg, she would fail. If she turned back, the village would suffer forever. Tears pricked her eyes, but she gritted her teeth. She had to endure. Summoning every ounce of strength, she pressed forward, refusing to let the pain consume her. The moment she reached the other side, the heat vanished, and the abyss behind her faded into nothingness. She had passed the test of courage, but the guardian wasn't finished yet. "Now," the bird said, its voice carrying a new weight. "The test of wisdom begins." With trembling hands, Amara lifted the golden egg, her heart pounding in her chest. She stood before the ancient tree where she had first found it, the nest still glowing faintly under the soft light filtering through the branches. The golden bird loomed beside her, its piercing eyes watching her every movement. She took a deep breath, then gently placed the egg back into its rightful place. The moment her fingers left the smooth, golden shell, a ripple of energy spread through the air, like the forest itself had exhaled in relief. The ground beneath her feet vibrated softly, and a warm, golden light radiated from the nest, spreading outward. Then, the forest began to heal. The twisted, darkened trees straightened, their leaves turning from brittle brown to lush green in an instant. The heavy, oppressive air lifted, replaced by a cool, refreshing breeze that carried the scent of earth and blooming flowers. Somewhere in the distance, the river gurgled back to life, its waters once again flowing freely. And then, the birds sang. A chorus of melodies rang through the forest, filling the air with life and harmony. The silence that had weighed so heavily upon the land was gone. The balance had been restored. Amara looked up at the golden bird, her throat tightening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't understand before. I was foolish and selfish." The bird tilted its head, the flames in its eyes softening. "Now you do." It spread its magnificent wings, golden feathers shimmering as they caught the light. "Nature is not ours to take from without consequence," it continued. "Greed leads to ruin, but wisdom leads to harmony. You have learned this lesson. See that you do not forget it." Amara nodded, her heart swelling with both relief and determination. She had made a terrible mistake, but she had been given a chance to make things right. As she turned to leave, she took one last look at the golden nest. The egg, once a symbol of temptation and chaos, now represented balance and respect. She knew she would never set foot in the sacred part of the forest again, not to take, not to disturb, but only to admire from afar. When she returned to the village, she found it healed as well. The crops stood tall once more, the river flowed freely, and the people, once filled with fear, now rejoiced at the miracle. No one questioned what had happened. They simply knew. Amara never spoke of the golden egg again. But in the years to come, whenever she walked through the forest's edge and heard the distant haunting song of the golden bird, she would close her eyes, place a hand over her heart, and remember. Some treasures are never meant to be taken. In the days that followed, the village slowly returned to normal. The once dying crops flourished again, the river flowed freely, and the birds filled the skies with their songs. The people, who had been gripped by fear and uncertainty, now understood something deeper. Nature is not to be taken for granted. Amara, though still young, had learned a lesson that would stay with her forever. She had seen firsthand the consequences of greed, how one impulsive act could disturb the delicate balance of the world. But she had also learned the power of gratitude, of returning what was never meant to be taken, of respecting the sacred forces that governed the land. Her grandmother, the village's wisest elder, sat with her one evening under the great baobab tree, where stories were often shared. She listened as Amara told her everything: the golden nest, the guardian bird, the trials, and the moment she restored the egg. The old woman smiled knowingly. "You have walked a path that many before you feared to tread," she said, "and now you carry a wisdom that must never be forgotten." And so, Amara made a vow, not just to herself but to the future generations of her village. She grew into a woman known not just for her kindness, but for her stories. She became the village's storyteller, sharing her tale under the great tree, where children gathered, their eyes wide with wonder. She spoke of the golden egg, the guardian bird, and the balance that must never be disturbed. "Not all that glitters is meant to be taken," she would say. The children listened, enraptured, and through her words, they understood. They learned that nature is not something to be conquered, but something to be respected. That greed leads to ruin, while gratitude and humility lead to harmony. As the years passed, Amara's story became more than just a tale. It became a warning, a lesson passed down from generation to generation. The golden egg was never seen again. But deep in the heart of the forest, where the ancient tree stood tall and strong, the golden bird still sang its haunting melody. A song of balance, a song of wisdom, a song of those who had learned and those who still had much to learn. And in the village, whenever a child's eyes strayed toward the mysterious depths of the forest, they would remember Amara's words and whisper them to themselves. Not all treasures are meant to be claimed. Some are meant to be protected.